The collections all started individually in terms of different faculty members in different areas long ago, more than 50 years ago or more, were essentially started generating these collections. People at that time were more natural history oriented, and for their studies they would go out and capture things and they would bring them in to study them.
Everything that really counts in the world comes from plants. If your food, oxygen, medicines, pretty much everything. That's our source of everything from the sun's energy. We find new species for Arizona about once a month on the average. And most of those are things that are invading Arizona, but occasionally we find things that people had never seen, never noticed before as a new species. Part of the role of a specimen is to document that it grows in a particular place. And nowadays we georeference exactly where we collect something, and we try to georeference all the old specimens as well. With the older specimens, we document what used to grow here. With our present specimens, we document what is growing here now. And in the future, people will be able to look back and say, okay, this is what it looked like in 2012.
Lichens are often mistaken for moss, but when you get closer, you can see a notable difference. Lichens are actually extremely remarkable organisms. They can survive long periods of dehydration and even exposure to outer space. They're classified in the kingdom fungi because they reproduce via the spores from the fungal partner, but the algal partner does photosynthesis. They vary a lot in their color and their shape and their size. They can be anything from these long, pendant, green-gray things hanging off of trees, or they can sometimes grow beneath the surface of rocks and are hardly visible at all. Often out here in Arizona, you'll see kind of like an orange growth over the rocks, and that's actually a lichen species.
There are approximately 30 species of native fishes in the state of Arizona. And almost every single one of them is either considered to be in serious trouble, many of them are listed federally, or are in the process of being listed. The fishes represent they're focused on the breadth of freshwater fish diversity in the desert Southwest. So they provide an excellent representation of what sorts of fish were here prior to a lot of the modifications. And by knowing all these sorts of things, it gives us information on what the streams were like. And it gives us a baseline, essentially, in terms of something to shoot for. As we manage these different species and try to help them recover, we know what the compositions of the communities are based upon collections like these.
Fossil plants are plants that have been preserved by various types of geologic processes that are millions of years old. Through the whole span of geologic time, down to 3 billion years ago, you have all kinds of different situations where leaves and stems and flowers and pine cones and things like that are preserved. Usually you see the outsides of things where you fracture them open and see surfaces, but we have a technique by which you can grind the rocks down and make very, very thin sections of them and make what we call peels. So we're able to go through and follow the internal anatomy, and it gives us a lot more information. So we have some material that we've been able to work on that way to get a lot more detail. Well, we're particularly interested in looking at the fruits and seeds and sometimes the flowers, because those are the things that have all the different parts that tell us what the most informative things that tell us what the plants are. And for my own research, we're interested in the evolution of different groups of plants, and so we do a lot of things where we compare the modern plant with the fossil to try to understand how the different groups of plants evolved and how they were distributed at different times and places through its history.
Insects are the most diverse lineage group of macroscopic organisms, and they are probably also hands down the most economically relevant. Insects play important ecological roles. They also serve as ecological indicators. Different species have different ranges of habitat that they can occupy and will occupy under certain circumstances. So this will lead into understanding things like habitat change over time, how maybe change in climate is felt by the diversity of organisms. People who are drawn to this kind of biodiversity, systematic research and inventory work. They are drawn to, one of the more immediate experiences that you can have as a human of interacting with nature. You go out there basically with your hands and relatively simple tools, and you come in contact with organisms, and then even in the lab, your contact with the organisms, it's basically something as simple as a regular microscope. And then the wealth of knowledge that you presumably have accumulated during your training. It's a pretty immediate way in terms of sensory experience.
Here at ASU alone, we have hundreds of thousands of records. And without being able to easily access those through an online database makes it extremely difficult to find what you're looking for. Imaging projects that we're currently doing also provide an actual image of the specimen. So say you wanted to look at a specimen in more detail, you could find it online first and decide if that is a good representation of what you're looking for. And then if so, you can either use just the image or actually go into the cabinets and find the physical specimen to look at.
So in a sense, we're still discovering things about the collection. We're discovering what groups we have a particular strength in and which groups we have gaps in.
We know that things are going to go extinct. It would be nice if they didn't, and if we find them before they go extinct, we might be able to preserve them.